Shalom v'salam and very welcome to Jüdische Studien heute. Today I'm joined by Dr. Uri Rosenberg, a postdoctoral researcher at Heidelberg University and a member of the Ben-Gurion Chair for Israel and Middle Eastern Studies at our Hochschule. His research focuses on Jewish-Arab relations in Israel and Palestine, as well as on Turkish Islamic discourses about Jews and Israel. Uri is also part of the Volkswagen Stiftung funded project Shared Citizenship in Deeply Divided Societies, which compares how people in Israel, Turkey and Cyprus navigate belonging, conflict and democracy. Hi Uri.
Hi, great to be here.
This is it's a long time ago that Uri and me met the first time. I think it was shortly after October 7th.
Yeah, difficult times.
When did you arrive before?
Just before October
just
7th.
before?
Just before, yeah. That was my first month here.
Wow.
Yeah. Difficult welcome to Heidelberg, yeah.
And it also how is my family? How's everyone in Israel?
Of course. And I have an NGO in Israel that of Israelis and Palestinians, so I had to also think about them, and navigate between Israelis and Palestinians and alumni, and it was very, very difficult times. These times, still are this, but the first months were hell for everyone, for every Israeli, for Palestinians. It was. I'm not the only one, but definitely it was hard.
One of the people that were directly concerned and directly hit, not like all the others. So that was one of the first times that we met, and then we all the time wanted to do a podcast, and now we're here together talking about the project Shared Citizenship in Deeply Divided Societies. So Uri, tell me more about the project. How long is this funded? What is it about? Maybe I first thought one sentence, but I think that's not fair. So maybe 2 or 3 sentences about the project and why it's important.
Great. So this is a special project. First of all, it's quite long for a project. It's 5 years long. We're after half a year, but we're really in the beginning, you could say. Another special thing is that it compares 3 societies that have not much been compared, at least not the 3 together. They have not been lumped up together. Turkey, Cyprus, and Israel. And these 3 countries, and we can talk about it a bit later, have different governing systems and different majority-minority relations, which this is the goal of our research. We want to compare and to see not only how majorities and minorities navigate their differences and their conflicts, even sometimes, many times conflicts, but also to offer the beautiful thing about this project is that it also has a goal to kind of affect civil society, to not be just an academics writing papers, but we also are working with civil society organizations in Israel, in Cyprus, and in Turkey to implement some of the things, whatever they find relevant, that we find in our research. So we're doing the research with them, but mainly they are going to do some implementation in their own work based on this research, and hopefully this will be a very interesting handshake between academia and civil society.
So that's maybe the reason why you're drawn to the project, because Uri is coming from, his background is not only academic, but also he's member or even co-founder of an NGO. So this mixture between academic knowledge and practical usage is very much based already, or that's already how you worked before.
Yeah, it comes quite easily for me because I kind of have one foot in each world, and until now I was a bit kind of torn between my academic side and my social entrepreneurship side, but now this project allows me to kind of balance in these two worlds, which sometimes don't talk well with each other. They don't know how to discuss things. So I love that I can be kind of a mediator between these two worlds, which both do great things, but different.
So you have on the one side the people that are more familiar with theory, and the other one are more like we need action, or we want to act on it. Who's part of the project? Talking about experiences within civil societies, you need some NGOs, and you need probably from every country someone. So tell us more about that.
So in terms of research, we have a team here and we have a team in Van Leer Institute, Jerusalem. So it's kind of 2 institutions together doing the project. And here it's mainly me and Johannes Becke, Professor Becke, which is the PI, and I'm doing the job as a postdoc researcher. And we have also research assistants. Currently it's Ruth and there's Fabiola, people that are hanging a lot in the Hochschule, and some of you might know them. And we might have more people along the way. We're aiming to have a bigger group also in Heidelberg to kind of connect people, to affiliate people, just like Ambivalent Enmity and other projects bring more and more researchers to affiliate, because we want to be a bigger and bigger project. In Van Leer, they have their own research team led by Professor Dani Filk, which is an expert in populism, and Dr. Marek Stern, which is an expert in civil society, especially in cities, mixed cities. So he looks a lot about urban landscape. And there's also a research assistant there called Eliza, and other people which are slowly getting affiliated to this project, including academics from Turkey and Cyprus, which we're bringing them and hoping to bring them to conferences and slowly bringing them into the project, because we don't want to do it alone. We think these are big questions, and we need to look at them in different angles. And yeah, it's definitely not just these two institutions doing it alone. And apart from that, as you said, we need civil society people. And we have 3 amazing NGOs. One of them is in Turkey, and they prefer to be anonymous because in Turkey it's a bit sensitive, so I won't name their name, but they're very active in Turkish civil society and very brave, doing a lot of things that sometimes the government is not so happy with, but they're doing it quite ferociously. They're mostly academic, but they do a lot of civil society-driven academia, so this is very connected to what we do. And then there are 2 organizations which are not anonymous, which are in Cyprus. We work with a social tech lab, which is an NGO that is not academic, but it does a lot of grass work between Turks and Cypriots on both sides of the islands, and brings them together, especially for entrepreneurship and dialogue about shared society and models of working together in the business, a bit more businessy.
Is that like, it sounds like Tech to Peace?
Yes, I know them from...
It's the Cyprus Tech to Peace.
It's kind of the Cyprus Tech to Peace.
Tech to Peace is actually the NGO Uri co-founded. Mm-hmm. What he just described was a social lab?
Social tech lab, yeah.
Social tech lab is doing with Cypriots and Turkish, the Turkish population. Is Tech to Peace doing with Palestinians and Israelis?
Yes, but Social Tech Lab is a bit less about dialogue and less about tech itself, but more about entrepreneurship and business. But yeah, the model is very similar. The model that they have is that you don't have to agree on everything. You don't even have to agree on most of the things, but you can agree that making money and business and using each other's resources in a good way is a method for peacemaking. And they share that with Tech to Peace, and that's how I know them, and that's how I brought them into the project. So this is a great...
Okay.
And in Israel, I just want to say one thing. In Israel, we have another NGO that is affiliated with Van Leer Institute, the Forum for Regional Thinking, which is also kind of in between academic and public discourse. And so they're also kind of in 2 legs, just like our partner in Turkey. So these are the 3 NGOs that will help implement the project.
But how do you work together? Are you always meeting somewhere else, or are you coming every time here, or how is it? Yeah. Also for the Turkish NGO that is anonymous, how secret does it have to be?
Listen, we're not doing anything illegal, and even if the Turkish NGO, the problem is that we are also affiliated with Israeli University, and in Turkey it's this, and we are dealing with things that are a bit connected to Turkish issues and Turkish Kurdish issues, so it's too sensitive. That's why they prefer to be anonymous. But our research is very kosher and halal for many Turks and Kurds, and I talked about it, including with I did some kind of research myself, kind of to see how people, even Turks which are a bit more right-wing and this, are not against the ideas that we're bringing. So it's not like we're doing anything controversial. Also in Israel, I think even between right-wing Israelis and right-wing Palestinians, the idea of our research is not a radical one that will upset deeply, and that's part of the beauty also of the project, because we're trying to create models that are win-win. That maybe some sides will have to give up their maximalistic demands. Maybe the minority will not get everything that they want, and the majority will not get everything that they want. But I think the beauty of what we're doing, and this is maybe why Volkswagen was impressed with our idea, is that we're working with real people, with real peacemaker, but also real civil society people that are not in the peacemaking world. We're looking at models that are currently tried and not forcing. We're not like Brussels coming and forcing our opinion from European Union to these countries and saying, let's educate these primitive people. Not at all. We're taking them very, very seriously. We know that their conflict is real, and they're frustration and anger and historical memories are real, and both the majorities and the minorities are hurt from each other and afraid of each other, and we take that very, very seriously, and we don't try to bring this. And this is why we're working with NGOs that really have boots on the ground and are really respected in society. They're not these fringe leftist NGOs that nobody cares about, and people say, oh, they're just funded by Europe. No, these are real NGOs that people really come to their activities and are really interested in what they do, and not just the fringe of Turkish, Cypriot and Israeli society. So this is also important.
And I guess that's also the reason why the project could be successful, because you have this sustainable basis, like you can actually do something with it because it comes from within.
Absolutely. I don't think it will be successful for everyone, but I think we'll get more people, including from mainstream society, not just the very, very liberal fringes, to cooperate with us, or at least to be interested in us.
So give us a concrete example of what shared citizenship might look like in everyday life.
So we're trying to explore it right now with kind of questions to civil society actors and to people. So if you ask me next year, I will have a bit more data. But right now, what we're imagining, the answers that we'll get, so there are two things: what shared society already is happening, and what can they dream of, and what can they learn from each other? Because some things are happening in Turkey that are not happening in Israel, and not happening in Cyprus. For example, Turks and Kurds are marrying each other, and it's not a big. Not only it's not a big deal, nobody cares. Okay, in Cyprus, Turks and Cypriots are not marrying each other. In Israel, Jews and Arabs are not marrying each other so much, and definitely not in Palestinian territories, which is another this. So, for example, Turkey is leading the way in not looking at this. On the other hand, in other places in Turkey, it's worse, okay, because the minority repression is the worst, maybe from all these three examples. So there's something to learn maybe from Israel and Cyprus about how to work with demands of minorities that you don't like, which some of them are secessionist, and I agree with the Turks that say that the PKK, for example, is secessionist, and they even have elements that support violence. But that doesn't mean that for example, every mayor that is somehow affiliated with a Turkish nationalism should be put in jail. This is something that doesn't happen in other places, that you put in jail somebody just for having a thought. So even also Turkey that has some things that we can learn from this. So there's a lot of things that the three countries already have, and we can also imagine more, not kind of forcing them, again, liberal democratic values that maybe are happening in Germany. I would doubt if they totally happen, but working with their relatively conservative populations and looking at what models can be achieved. For example, in Israel, a lot of people are already talking about including Arab members of parliament and a party in the next coalition if Netanyahu doesn't get elected. And it already happened, and there was no earthquake. Things happened and things were good. So this can be an experiment that continues and normalized in a good way.
Can I now think of the project that, like the daily work of the project is collecting issues where the existence of minority and majority is problematic, and collecting them for all three cases? It's like marriage, maybe it's also owning land, maybe it's elections, work license, whatever, schools for kids. So you collect all daily things that we take for granted, but you see it clashes. Minorities have different rights than majorities. Compare all those three cases and look at what. Maybe now you said Turkey is actually Turks and Kurds can marry, no one cares. So, okay, we take this, and actually for the two others, it could work similarly. Is that how it works? Or how does the project practically work? How do you?
I don't think we will try to get Jews and Arabs or Cypriots and Turks and this to marry. That was just an example of that every country we have something to learn from. That the fact that Turkey is maybe the least democratic doesn't mean that it doesn't have models of shared society. De facto, Turks and Kurds are doing much more than Cypriot Turks and Cypriot Kurds. Cypriot Turks and Cypriot Greeks, which have a border between them. So the country which is the most separate and that has the least interaction is actually the country which is in the EU, and you would expect it to be the most liberal in this. It's very counterintuitive.
Why is that? What do you think?
Why is it? Because it's a historical thing that happened. That in the 60s they tried to have a good model of a government. When they broke up with the British, they had a constitution that was helped by the Greeks, the British, and the Turks to build something that will allow people to have representation in government, even the minority of the Turks. But what happened is the Greek Cypriots had a relatively radical president, which was also religious, and he believed that Cyprus should be joined to be part of Greece. It was called the Enosis. So the idea was that Cyprus should not even be independent. It should be a Greek island with a Turkish minority, but part of Greece, just like Crete is part of Greece, just like Rhodos is part of Greece. And the Turks, of course, didn't accept it. They said, wait, we're 20% now of an island. You want us to be 1% of a whole country called Greece? No way. If anything, we want to be part of Turkey, or let's separate. So this started a spiral that in the end, in 1974, the Turks invaded the island, and they had the right to, because they were guarantors of the Turkish minorities, so they didn't do it illegally, but they stayed there forever until now. And they de facto created a separate state called the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, which is totally separate from the south. So the two communities hardly meet. Only lately they started doing some business together and meeting in peace meeting, but very few Cypriot Greeks have friends from the Cypriot Turkish side. So in Israel, and between Jews and Arabs in Israel, and between Turks and Kurds, that situation is much, much, much better, and people are interacting much more, not without conflict, but much more interaction.
And if you say there could be, that there's this border and there could be done much more, but now there's a little bit of a movement, who's interested in a change? Like, in which interest is keeping the situation, and in which interest is it that it's getting changed?
So this is a great question, and one of the questions that we will look in the research, which will be a lot about of course, also historical research about reading articles and reading kind of news and speeches, but a lot of speaking to people on the ground. And we're going to ask this. We're going to ask ourselves. We're not going to ask it directly, but we're trying to see who are the potential spoilers, and who are the potential people who will be bought into it. And I think surprisingly, we will see that not always there's correlation between how liberal you are and how open you are to more shared society and more shared citizens. But it's not exactly. We see already in the preliminary research that some people from mixed cities in Israel, for example, which are very conservative, okay, cities like let's say Akko or Lod or Ramle or Beersheva, which is becoming a bit more this. So some
Beersheva is becoming a bit more
mixed, okay, and Haifa definitely, even although Haifa is not so conservative. So sometimes we see that the conservative elements between Jews and Arabs are actually the ones not pushing politically they're more on the right, the Jews and the Arabs, but the conservative elements are sometimes the people that we can learn from more about real shared society. And I talk about businesses together, about doing things together, going to each other's weddings, the small things, but also kind of supporting each other in terms of a neighborhood, kind of living together in neighborhoods. So there is no direct correlation between how conservative or how nationalist the person is and how willing he is to give up a bit of his maximalistic claims in order to have a better shared society. And this is something we're already seeing, but we expect to see it also in the research. Of course, religious people might be a bit more tending to separate, but even that not. We're expecting to see also, for example, I researched Turkish political Islam, and I can say that the Islamists in Turkey are having a lot more Kurdish support. Okay, Erdogan is supported by many more Kurds than the secular parties. So in Turkey, actually, Islamism, surprisingly, and I'm not promoting Islamism either, but Islamism is a vehicle for Kurds to be involved more in Turkish political and social society and speak their language, the Kurdish language. So you would expect that Islamists will be the obstacle, and you expect that Shas or a religious or the other religious party in Israel will be the obstacle, but sometimes no. Sometimes they are a vehicle that you can work with. I'm not saying that they are the most liberal people that will allow everything to change, but they are people, there are strings you can pull also with a lot of conservative people, and our project aims to respect the conservative people and give them a voice on the table, not to enforce our ideas coming from university on people which are not all university graduates and not all liberal Democrats.
Now you mentioned conservative people and kind of religious people. So if first in Turkey and then you said Shas, so it's Israel. So when you take all the societies that you're doing research on and you have the NGOs from, what do they have in common? Or what is the thing that divides them the most?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what comes to my eyes when I say they have, first of all, geography. They all live in the same geography. They all share the Mediterranean. But this is just on the map you can see it. Also, I think they're more similar to other countries because they're all at least trying to be democracies. Okay, Turkey to some extent backsliding. Israel is struggling, but it's still at this. Cyprus, again, I said there's a difference between the south and the north, but both are considered democracies. So they're all unlike countries in the Arab world, which most of them are not. These are all post-Ottoman countries, like coming from the same region, that are all nation states on one hand, but trying to be democratic, and all three of them have minorities which miraculously, I don't know why, are around 20%, so very big minorities. In Cyprus, it's very hard to call the Turks a minority because the island is separated from 74, but if we imagine the island as a whole, which a lot of Turks and Greek Cypriots do imagine it, then Turks are minority. They're just all in the north in a kind of a breakaway country, but they are a minority of 20%. Also Arabs in Israel, also Kurds in Turkey. So this is a very sizable minority, which is maybe similar to India with its Muslim minority, but it's not similar to other countries that usually have only 2% minority, 3%, very mean. So when you have 20% and you're a nation state, it's normal that the minority says, hey, 1 out of 5 of the people are from my side. What is this, sorry for my French, bullshit that I only get to human rights? I want also minority rights. I want bigger rights. I want to have autonomy. And then the majority sometimes naturally says, hey, wait a second. This is my only country. We don't have another Israel. We don't have another Cyprus. We don't have another Turkey. I don't know. We can't give you everything you want. And then they say, then there is okay, so we'll break away, or we'll form another, or we do violence. So there is a spiral between the majority and minorities. And of course, I'm kind of oversimplifying it. And of course, there are also nefarious actors, both in the majority and the minority, which are acting in bad faith, that want to harm the majority or the minority. But in general, all three countries have good people on both sides, which are just in a spiral that has to do with the fact that they are nation states, that are the majority wants to keep them at nation states, and the minorities are challenging this question of, is this a nation state, or is this a state that we also are a nation that belongs, not just belongs, but has a say on the table, because we're not a small minority.
And where do you think are the biggest differences?
Okay. One more thing that I want to say is that all minorities that are indigenous, that unlike Europe that has migrant minorities, here we're talking about
that's true.
That's
and
another thing that is. And where they're different, okay, as I already said that Cyprus is divided, and I already said that Turkey is backsliding the most democratically. Where are they different?
You said something about the violence, so maybe the violence in Israel is something that doesn't, or is that not known, or does that not happen in Turkey?
The violence in Israel, I would say Turkey, in terms of Jews and Arabs inside Israel in 48, we're not looking at the West Bank and Gaza. We're not counting it as part of Israel. And that's interesting, we're looking only at what's called Arab Israelis or Palestinian citizens of 48. Okay? So we're talking about 20% of the population, people from Haifa, from Jaffa, from Ya'ko, and maybe East Jerusalem, although it's kind of tricky to say. But let's say we include East Jerusalem. Still, when you count the number of violent incidents between Jews and Arabs inside Israel since 48, and you compare it with the bloodshed in Turkey or in Cyprus even, compared to the population, they're just 1 million, then Israel is actually the most peaceful of the three. I know it's strange to say that, because Israel has a conflict with the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, but actually if you look at the Arab Israelis, Arab 48, and you look how many of them are involved in violent groups, or how many of them are fighting violently, very few. And the government repression is also less, I would say, although it's difficult to be an Arab in Israel, but still, I think some people would say it's easier than to be, to some extent, a Kurd in Turkey, especially if you are political Kurds. If you are just a Kurd which wants to get along, it's it's okay. But if you're a Kurd with political demand and political beliefs and you speak about it in university, you might get in jail.
So where are the biggest differences?
As I said, the level of violence and the way also the countries are designed. Israel is a majority focused society in which the minorities have rights, human rights and legal rights, and also some autonomy, like in cultural issues. So unlike Turkey, that only now it's a bit starting to go to that. The minority has in Israel they have their own schools in their own language and they learn their own thing. So in Turkey, only now they're starting to articulate this idea that Kurds can maybe, of course, speak their language. It already is happening, but the idea of school is still a bit kind of crazy for a Turkish person to imagine. Kurds are imagining it, of course. Turkey and Kurds have also a very violent group called the PKK, which is not mainstream in the Kurdish area, but a lot of Kurds support it. So to say that it's a very fringe group, it would be a mistake, while the Arab Israelis do not join resistance movements or terrorist movements like Hamas and PFLP. So very few cases of taking a gun and shooting Israelis or hijacking a bus by Arab Israelis. So in Turkey, I would say the issue of terrorism within the country is much more but also Israel has it. And in Cyprus, it doesn't happen anymore, but it did happen. And in Cyprus, what's interesting, another thing that makes it different, is also the majority, the Cypriots, the Greek Cypriots, felt like a minority and have the grievances of a minority because they were kicked out of the north in 1974 when the Turks invaded the island. A few months later, all the Greeks from the north, which were a very high percentage, were kicked out. Also all the Turks from the south. But many more Greeks became refugees. So the Greeks in the south, which are the majority of the island, have some of the grievances which you can associate with the minority, which makes Cyprus very, very strange and interesting, because the Greek Cypriots, which are majority, are speaking in the language of the right of return and getting back our property, as if they were Kurds or Arabs in Israel, as if they are the minority. So in Cyprus, it's very, very strange and very different.
But the Turks in the north do the same. It's not only the
Yes, but less so. The Turks in the north, most of them, from our preliminary research, it seems like they're more like they gave up to some extent the properties in the south and they just want to be left alone. They say, we can unite the island, but we're fine just keeping what we have and being a separate country or even being connected to Turkey. So not all Turks want to unite the island. Also, not all Greeks want to unite the island, but that's another story.
But would that be one solution that could work? Like, okay, let's just, I mean, that's not what you hope for, I guess. And I hope that's not what the project wants to reach for. But then, okay, let's separate and that's it. Or let's stick to the separation. Let's don't talk about it anymore.
The project is not trying to make a point. If a lot of people will say, let's keep to the separation, and we see that this is a strong, yes, the project is looking at integration more than separation. But if we will see that a lot of voices, in the Turkish Cypriot side, I think we will hear a lot of such voices. But if we hear also Greek Cypriots that say, you know what, since 1974 we live apart, we're already part of the EU, let's not mix together. There's already too many settlers coming from Turkey. The Turks are not only the original Turks, there are many people. So let's stay separate. If we hear these voices a lot and we feel that this is we will not force on them. Of course, this is just a research project. We don't want to force them on that they don't want. But from our research, we see that a lot of Turks and a lot of Greek Cypriots do want to unite the island. The question is how. The devil is in the details.
Right.
And just like Israel and its Arab population, and just like Turkey and its Kurdish population, all agree that the country should be shared, but how? Should it be a majority-driven country? Should it be a federation? Should there be a veto right for the minority? Should the minority be integrated in every office in a 50-50 or just according to their percentage? There are many questions of the how. And how does it happen in the street, in business? How does it happen in education? There are a lot of questions that even people in Cyprus that want to have one country, and also people in Israel that imagine a bright future for Jews and Arabs, they don't agree. When you get to the details, you see that they don't agree, the minority and the majority. And that's part of our interest. What do they not agree on? Because saying we want peace, we want to live together, everybody says that. That's easy to say. This is like, it's very cheap, we say in Hebrew.
It's
cheap words.
self-understood.
Yeah.
Everyone wants
But
that.
what does it mean you want peace? What does it mean you want a shared society? What are you ready to give up? What kind of a future are you ready to imagine between yourself as a majority and the other as a minority? And the opposite, the minority also has a voice. What are you willing to give up as a minority in order not to scare the majority and to make them agree and feel comfortable with you as this? So both sides, we're going to check what are their compromising, they're willing to compromise in order to create a better society. And of course, we'll look at a gradual approach. We're not looking for revolutions because we're not a revolutionary, we're not working with revolutionary CSOs, civil society actors, but people who are working on the ground, and we want to see step by step, baby steps, what can be done and how can it be imagined, and bringing people together to talk about it.
But when you say when you talk about all the details and you say, well, yeah, everyone wants peace, everyone wants that to get along with each other, of course, but as soon as you get to the details, you differ. What is the impact you hope for with your project? Because I think that the difficulties start when you go to the detailed plans. At the beginning, everyone says, yeah, why not a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine? Good work. Well, but how? And then it goes to the planning, and same might be true for the others. Well, we're not talking about Israel and Palestine, we're talking about the Arabs in Israel, within Israel. But even then we say, let's give them the same rights as the Israelis have, the Arab Israelis and the Jewish Israelis. Everyone says yes, but as soon as it goes to the planning, everyone says, yeah, but I didn't mean that. So what kind of impact do you hope for? Because as you said, you're not a revolutionary society, you don't have a kind of militant NGOs with you, thanks God. But you do hope for an impact within the societies because you have the NGOs with you and you want the project to get more people in, and you want to get bigger. And so what's the impact you hope for?
Okay, so I come from the NGO world, and I know that change with very deeply divided societies, and all three are considered very deeply divided, okay? Even if Turks and Kurds get married, it doesn't mean that they're not deeply divided. So in these societies, change takes time, and we're not trying to force up people's throat a change that they don't want. But we are trying to explore what kind of dreams do they have? Where do they want to see society, their society? Because I think even for the majority, they have an interest. Most people in the majority, people think that majority society just want to keep the status quo and just want to repress the minorities. I don't think so. I think a lot of people in the majority have conscience and they want the best for their neighbors, which is coming from another ethnic group, but they're just scared that the other ethnic group, the minority, will ask something that will make them give up their country. So the question is, first of all, what kind of models already work? Because as I said, we're not assuming that these three societies don't have an already de facto political, but also social and economical and just in normal offices, de facto shared society and shared living, and even shared politics of democracy on the urban level. So we don't assume that everything is broken to begin with. This is the first thing. We don't assume that we have to learn everything from Europe, that we have to copy what is envisioned in Brussels. We are looking for voices from within and from voices that fit these societies. And if anything, from the outside, we're looking at models of other post-Ottoman countries, for example, ex-Yugoslavia. I know that ex-Yugoslavia doesn't sound like a good model of this, but at least after the 90s, they're not killing each other now, and their societies are learning to live more as it. And also in Greece, you have minority. There are other countries in this region. Georgia could be an interesting example in this, that are minorities and majorities are somehow living together and kind of not assimilating, not forcing the minorities to assimilate, but respecting their cultural and even political voices. If you ask me what is a good result, I think just opening up new ideas and new models and bringing them to people that have a political power, for example, a mayor or somebody like a grassroots leader of an NGO, okay? Somebody like myself. If I bring it to somebody who's leading an NGO, he can implement it or she can implement it in their NGO. She can say, wow, this is very nice. I want to take these things that you have produced and kind of make them for my Jewish and Arab high schoolers. That's great. That NGO CEO will take my model and do something that we designed for other NGOs, for her own NGO in her own way. And they will discuss it, and more Israelis, Jews and Arabs will meet and talk about these models and these ideas, and more of them will open up to the idea that one side's victory is not one side's failure. There can be a win-win. And also with Kurds and Turks, we see that people are hungry and thirsty for these kind of models. For Turks, even nationalist Turks and national Kurds are now sick and tired of all this killing and death and this, and they want to live together. In Istanbul is the biggest, people don't know it, but Istanbul is the biggest Kurdish city in the world, okay? The city with the most number of Kurds. So it's very hard to say that Kurds all live in southeast Turkey in a this. And also Haifa is a very big Arab city, okay? So it's not like Cyprus that people live separately. And even in Cyprus, not everybody wants to live separately. People live together, and when people live together, they care about each other. They want the best also for the other side. They don't want to continue repressing. They just don't know how. So even opening the discussion, say, look at this model. Look what's happening in Turkey. Look what's happening in Cyprus. Look what's happening in Europe. Look at what's happening in other post-Ottoman countries, okay, that solve these kind of issues. Let's learn from them. Let's learn from them. It's great. Just the learning and just the thinking about it, giving people the idea that to explore it, that it's not all or nothing. It's not either the nation state or the destruction of the nation state. Some people think in black or white. No, it's not like that. There are many models that working in other countries, okay, and many ideas that have not yet been implemented or have been implemented but didn't work. But that means that they can't. It doesn't mean that now they can't be reintroduced. Just because it failed in Cyprus between 1960 and 1974 doesn't mean that they can't try again with similar or maybe different models. Okay. So this is what we're trying to do, to open people's mind to the idea and people that matter, okay? It can be school children, but it also we want to reach people that are doing things in politics, in life, in civil society. These are the best people to target.
And if you think about the European countries, what could European countries, from a European context, what could we learn from your project?
Okay, this is a great question, and this is one of the selling points we had with Volkswagen, because we argued, and we still believe in it, that Europe, strangely enough, has a lot to learn from Israel, Turkey, and Cyprus, because Europe doesn't have these tense majority-minority relations. Maybe Romania with the Hungarian minority has a bit of these numbers, but still, Romania, nobody's killing each other, and the hate is very low. So most countries in Europe, especially Western Europe, either don't have minorities, I think very high, or the minorities are migrants. But what we are arguing is that because of populism and because of the fact that the migration is changing the demographics of these countries, there will be issues in the future that populist leaders are already exploiting to say, hey, look, we should kind of put these people, we should work violently against these migrants because they want this and this. So already these voices are heard in the fringe, and not only in the fringe. You know, you have populist parties arising in Europe, and Europeans, the democracy doesn't have tools. The liberal democracy doesn't always have tools except for buzzwords of how to deal with these tensions between majorities and minorities when the minorities become larger and they rightfully demand a place in the table. So I think Europe is not heading to become the new Cyprus or the new Israel or the new Turkey, but many things that have happened in the last 50 years in these three countries are happening slowly in Europe and will happen in the future. And what we're doing is kind of helping European Union countries that might encounter such things in the future because of populism and because of tense majority-minority relations, helping them cope with it from day one, not waiting until the problem becomes very, very severe and then it's too late.
Right. I just try to get into my mind the similarities between immigrants or third generations with immigrant backgrounds and the Arab population in Israel that they were actually born there, and so, but there are some similarities.
Many, because it doesn't, if you're third generation, it doesn't really matter that your grandparents came from Turkey or in Holland, it's Morocco. You're third generation, you speak only Dutch, you speak only German, maybe you speak a bit of Turkish but broken. You live in Kreuzberg, your grandfather was...
But what is then the problem? If you're third or fourth or fifth, then you're Dutch or German or Belgium or Belgic or whatever. So the where your parents originally come from should play a smaller role the more generation you have within your family?
Theoretically, they could have been, some minorities have been more assimilated. But if the minority of migrants chooses or is sidelined not to assimilate, which is their choice and we cannot judge them for it. So some minorities assimilate and you can't notice it. You don't know who is Polish second, third generation here, because also they look the same as Germans, and you hardly know, unless you know their last name, that they're Polish. So, and maybe Ukrainians will have the same because of Christianity, because of the color of the skin. But once the minority has a different language or a different culture and a different religion, so they might have justifiably a feeling that they don't want to fully assimilate into the majority. And then the question is, what do you do? What does the majority do and what does the minority do? And it's not the same as Jews and Arabs, and it's not the same as Kurds and Turks, but the same questions are already being asked in Europe about these issues. And I think looking at Turkey, Cyprus, and Israel, and looking at what our the research will bring, could help Europe also analyze and understand where they could be in 20 years or 30 years, or even to extend a bit now.
Right. So you talked about the different cultures that maybe come together. So how was that for you? I'm talking again about the project, about the team with different cultures, with interdisciplinary and international team. How did that team shape the project, and how did that maybe also shape your own approach towards the project?
So this is a great question, because the team is very, very interdisciplinary, even just the researchers. Okay, one is a social scientist, I'm a historian, one is a sociologist, we have someone from conflict studies. So there are a lot of theories that we have to teach each other and kind of give each other crash courses in the theories and in the literature.
Look at my tools. No, I have my tools. No, we're
not trying not to fight, but to kind of integrate tools. But yeah, I'm sure in the future when we will have to write joint articles, there's also going to be fights. But I think this will enrich the project, because when you look at it from a historical perspective, as I might do, and when you look at it from political science perspective, as maybe Johannes Becker will do, or sociology, you will get different results and different this. And then you add to it civil society people that are not coming as a nice coating on the cake. They're not kind of a flavor. They're really part of our research. They're somehow collecting also the data, especially in languages and in societies which are conservative, and they would prefer to speak to people on the ground that they know. So they're part of the research, and they're part of shaping the research, and they also will give us say this question is too provocative, this model is too provocative, it doesn't fit in Cyprus. So they are coming from their reality on the ground. They might be less theoretical, but they know what's happening. They know what has been tried already. So they know where we shouldn't go and where we should go, and how should we frame things, and how should we not upset people with models that we're trying to test, because these things are sensitive. So I think this civil society organization will be super important, because they are trusted and they are with boots on the ground, and they know the delicacies of which words even to use to not get people all heated up and say, no, I'm never going to do that because this will destroy my rights or this will destroy my country. They know how to talk, they know how to present it. It's a lot about getting the people engaged with it, and we want as many people as possible. So they come with a real practice on the ground. And they, in year 5, in the last year, they will lead the project by implementing it. And again, in different ways. In Turkey, it will have to be a bit more quietly. In Cyprus, it will have to be on the buffer zone. Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots, they can cross the border, but they usually don't, and they don't want to. So you have to bring them to a UN-administered zone where our partner works, and physically bring them together, and they don't mind, because it's not Greek and it's not Turkish, it's neutral. So we will do it there. In Israel, Jews and Arabs can go wherever they want, but still they need to want. And now after October 7th, the last 2.5 years, I don't have to tell people that listen to this podcast, because they probably know that the Jews and the Arabs mostly have drifted apart, not just between Israelis and Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, but also between Jews and Arabs, or Jews and Palestinians inside Israel. So it's going to be hard to bring them together to talk about these issues, because there's a lot of difficulties and a lot of mistrust. So this is a very hard moment also to do it in Israel, even though the people live relatively together.
And did that change your own approach towards the project, or did you have come with so many experiences because of the NGO that you actually knew what's coming?
First of all, I don't know what's coming because we just started. I think I'm going to be surprised a lot because I am somehow an expert in Turkey and in Israel because I research Turkey and I live in Israel and I also read this. But Cyprus for me is a new place that I'm just learning. I know more about it than the average person, but Cypriots, even people who are not academics at all, know much more than me, so I have a lot to learn. So there's a lot of surprises there. Also in Turkey, there's so many little things between the Turks and the Kurds that I don't know, and I'm learning from reading and from talking to people. Even on Israel, I think I will be surprised a lot. No matter how much work you do, there's always new things that are happening, and the new generation, I see it in Tech to Peace in my NGO, you can learn a lot from the new generation, not because they know things, but because they have new ideas and they're just more fresh, and sometimes they're not stuck with paradigms that my generation, I'm already almost 50, I'm not so old, but I already was brought up in a certain way, and they are a bit fresh and they come this. It doesn't mean that they're more peaceful, but it does mean that the newer people, the more people you talk to that are younger, they sometimes see things a bit from a blank slate, from a tabula rasa, and bring new ideas to the table that I haven't thought of. So there's a lot of surprises, I think, for all of us as academics and as civil society, and especially the comparisons. I don't think there's anyone in the team, or maybe in the world, that knows everything that we're going to discover, because there's so many things and so many even somebody who's an expert, the biggest expert in Turkey, doesn't know Cyprus and Israel so much. So usually people...
So if I bring alive Bernard Lewis, he is the expert on Ottoman history, Israel, Turkey, whatever. So you think, Bernard, you have to learn a lot.
He would have to learn less than others because he's a great guru and great rabbi. But first of all, he missed a few things since he died, so we'll have to catch him up. And also, he is, he's not an expert in Cyprus and he doesn't know, he didn't look at what's happening on the right now. And as a historian, I can say that history matters, but a lot of things are happening thanks to social media, also in a bad way, thanks to social media, because of social media. And the last 20 years are very meaningful. So a historian that dealt with the 1970s and 80s is not necessarily an expert in what. So I think there's something to learn, even for Bernard Lewis, and definitely for me. I'm very excited. I'm already learning a lot.
And what would you say, let's say we have 2031, so 5 years from now on, what would be a possible successful outcome of this project?
Okay, so academically, I think we want to publish at least one book that kind of sum up our research, kind of looks at these ideas at a different perspective. So a book and articles, peer-reviewed articles, and hopefully high-level journals. The articles will be about the countries themselves, but also comparative articles. So this is the academic success, and us looking at comparatively and looking at minority-majority relations in these three countries, and maybe bringing more academics from other countries which are not initially included, like Greece, like Kosovo, and other countries that are maybe have similar this. So academically, to create a group looking at minority-majority relations in history and right now in the post-Ottoman world, to make it a working group and doing conferences together, that'll be great. In terms of civil society, the sky's the limit, because we don't have a lot of money for civil society, but civil society tends to, if they like an idea, and I know this from my work with Israelis and Palestinians, it has a energy, and people drive for more grants, and they say, okay, let's do more things with this idea. So I think the 1 year that the civil society, year 5, in the last year, that when they do something, I'm hoping that there will be a snowball effect, that a few activists say, you know what, I really like these ideas. Okay, they're academic and boring, and they're written this, but I like how they're practically framed, and there's something real. Let's do more dialogue about it. Let's do more. Let's do it in my municipality. And that I don't know how to imagine, because I know from Tech to Peace that young people or people that have political flair, if you give them some good ideas or just bring them together and say, let's look at it from this angle, sometimes they come up with follow-up projects that are much better than your own. So I don't even know what will be the success, but my success will be that it will be more than 1 year, which is funded by Volkswagen, but we will see ripple effect by some people in some groups that go way beyond.
I have a personal question which I didn't think of before, but while I was listening to you, it came into my mind, because since you're here, like now it's been for 2.5 years, we said at the beginning, your research is not only theoretically just based on whatever you read, but it has always this practical component. It's like with Tech to Peace, it's this with ambivalent enmity, it's with the NGOs. say after the project, could you see yourself going back, I say, to pure academic research without the practical component?
Good question. Actually, what I did with Tech to Peace was not so academic. This was my side job, and I never managed to fully integrate it with my academic work. So this is the first time I'm really doing both.
Okay.
And yes, I see myself being only academic because this is what academy demands from you. But I do imagine myself being an academic in an institution that respects the fact that I want to do other things that are social, and actually doesn't say to me, I want a boss or a kind of an institution that says, Uri, it's great that you're doing Israeli and Palestine peace work, that you're working also on now Kurdish, and we want more dialogue, we want more civil society, and an institution that will hopefully take me as a professor that knows that this is what I bring will benefit from my skills, and I will benefit from the fact that they will allow me to do different things, because there are 24 hours in a day and you don't have to do only research and research and research. There are a lot of practical things you could do that can also benefit research. It's not two things. I don't believe these are two things
that's exactly what I meant, because now it can tremendously benefit research if you take in practical experience. That's what what's the background of my question was, because it seems like maybe you miss something out if you focus only on the written word without looking at the lived world. That's why I asked. I did not try to separate it, but I tried to say that the enrichment you have through the practical experience you will miss maybe.
I will miss, and I will try in my life to always have both things. Even if I make a living from academia, I hope that I will be able to navigate these two worlds, because academia, if it's only, especially these very if you're talking about medieval history, it doesn't have a lot of implications. But if you talk about contemporary history of Israel, Turkey, and Cyprus, even if you talk about the 70s or the 60s or the 50s, it has a lot to do with the people are still alive. They still have these memories. So it's very, very much connected to the conflicts today. So this region that we have, Israel, Palestine, the Middle East, the Balkans, these are all conflict zones. The Caucasus too, these are places of conflict. And when you research history, it has a lot of implications. You understand today, and I already did it even when I write papers about history, I always think to myself, and I try to also write it, that it has implications, that this is interesting, not because these people wrote about it in the 70s or 60s or 80s, but because even if these people are dead now, and most of them are still alive, their ideas linger on, okay? The 70s was not so long ago. I was alive in the 70s. I was a child. I don't remember anything. I was a baby. But still, the ideas that were in the 70s are very much alive and kicking. So things that happened, it's not the 1870s. Even the 1870s are still relevant today. But the 1970s, definitely. This is recent history, and it has a lot of implication on today.
Which is true. So if we come to the end of this podcast, what would you like listeners of this podcast, of this episode, to take away from your work regarding also the project?
Okay, so first of all, I hope you found it interesting, our work interesting, and try to follow us. We'll try to do some events also in Heidelberg and that are open to the public, including a seminar in June, which will be posted in this, and they will have an open event with practitioners and this. So come to our open events if you are in Heidelberg. See what you're publishing. If you're an academic, come join us for a workshop. Talk to us, write to us if you're dealing with similar things. We want to make this an open tent, not just for Israel, Cyprus, and Turkey, but for other countries which have similar issues. So join us if you're interested. The more the merrier. We want to be a bigger and bigger and bigger research group, and in the end to publish and to affect other countries. And I hope that the listeners will take the idea that conflict is not forever, and conflict is not only done by evil people that are hateful and they're terrorist or suppressing or fascist. This is the street logic of protesters, but in reality, conflict is many times product of very good people and very good societies that are just not finding a way to live together because they have a competing interest and competing fears and historical memories. And yes, sometimes nefarious people that are playing with their mind with populistic ideas, and definitely we should not forget that. But also good politicians sometimes don't solve conflict. So I would say to people that are listening to this, don't stop trying, don't stop trying to understand people in conflict, don't condescend them. ask them, try to understand why their countries are in conflicts, whether they're Israelis, Palestinians, Turks, Kurds, and try to understand the fact that you don't have a conflict in Germany or in America yet, or at this moment, doesn't mean that conflict is not natural. Unfortunately, it is natural, and we have to work with it, and we have to learn how to make things better. But it's not something just barbaric people do. It's something very normative people are entrenched in and don't know how to find a way out. And I'm not saying we will find a way out, but the NGOs that are working with us, they're trying. And I'm trying. And a lot of academics that are in this project are doing it from love and for care about their own society. And I hope this will inspire other people from academia and from civil society to try for conflict resolution and not for taking side and promoting hate.
Thank you. I really look forward to the events still to come this summer. Really, my last question that I like to ask everyone on the podcast. Is there an experience that has changed your life? And if so, what was that?
So I think I would say two experiences. One was traveling in India after the army. All the Israelis say this, but yeah, for me it was first of all, it was very long. It was 2 years on and off that I had to all the time go to get money, make money in Israel. But in the end, 2 years netto of my life I spent in India. And there I kind of first learned about different societies in a very deep way, in a kind of learning their languages and learning about the culture, about this. So living in India as a traveler really made me who I am and made me shift to these questions of history, anthropology, sociology, what I'm doing now. Otherwise, I would be today probably a computer engineer making money, which is not bad, but doing things that are to do with programming. So this is one thing that changed my life. And the second thing that changed my life was opening Tech to Peace and doing Israeli-Palestinian dialogue, which didn't make me a better academic. You know what? It maybe made me a better academic even, but it definitely made me a better person, because when you're trying to make Israelis and Palestinians connect, and mainstream Israelis and Palestinians connect, and you try to form a community out of people that don't agree on almost on anything, and trying to make them into friends and into partners and into people that understand each other, it's something that really shapes me in everyday life and how I see things and how I research things, and I can't forget it, and I still owe a lot of my growth to this amazing community and these alumni that came out of Tech to Peace, and now we're growing also in Germany, and we did a pilot with the Hochschule that also Germans are included in this picture. So this is great that we're bringing this dialogue to other places, including in Europe, and this really changed my life and is continuing to change my life as we speak.
Oh. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Uri, for your time and for the answers.
Thank you very much, Doro.
So that's it for today. Erklärt, werden,